வணக்கம்.
There is a difference between the central government and the state government. You are there to stand by the central.
இந்தியாவிலே நம்பர் 1 முதலமைச்சர் என்றால் நம்முடைய தலைவர் அவர்கள் தான். அவருக்கு நீங்கள் எல்லாம் இளைஞர்கள் எல்லாம் நீங்கள் துணை நிற்க வேண்டும், உங்களுடைய ஆதரவை கொடுக்க வேண்டும் என்று கேட்டுக்கொண்டு
let's go across to the guests who are joining us. Narayan Tirupati is Vice President, BJP Tamil Nadu. Syed Hafiz is DMK Spokesperson. Suman Siraman, political analyst. S. Muralidharan, political analyst. And I'm also joined by C.B. Pandey, who served as a former legal advisor to Governor of Uttar Pradesh. He's also former justice. So let me in fact go across to C.B. Pandey first up, because the big question that all of us are wondering about is, has the governor crossed the line when not reading out the prepared draft of the speech given to him by the state government? Is that not mandated for the governor to do, or does he have discretion even here? Uttar Pradesh is also former justice.
Can't say that he has crossed the border, he has violated any constitutional provision.
Okay.
In fact, there is no such provision in the Constitution where he is required to read the government statement before a house, and that should be whatever the state government has written. There is no constitutional provision. It is simply a tradition which is followed in democracy in India, because we have adopted the democracy system of a British system. And in British system, this is prevalent. Therefore, in India also, we adopted that system, and it is as a customary, or it's a tradition which they follow. So you can't say that he has acted against the Constitution. But at the same time, if the tradition are there, so my point of view, that governor being the executive head of the state should follow the traditions also, because after all, he is acting as a head of the state, not as an opposition leader or something beyond what the government. So therefore, whatever the government say, he should follow it. Yes.
Okay. What do you also make, Mr. Pandey, of the fact that as far as his invite is concerned, the governor's office invite is concerned, the state emblem is no longer there, the union government emblem has been put, and even the name of the state, which he very publicly expressed the fact that Tamilagam is a better name for Tamil Nadu and not the current name. Even Tamil Nadu has been replaced by his chosen or more preferred name for the state. Do you believe that this is also in some ways needless confrontation with the current government of the state?
Definitely it is a confrontation, because in the constitutional first schedule, the name of the state of Tamil Nadu is mentioned as a state Tamil Nadu, as a Tamil Nadu. So now, so long that in the constitution, Tamil Nadu has been mentioned, so he is the governor of state of Tamil Nadu. So therefore, he can't say that some other, as a governor in the official capacity, he can't say that he is not a governor and some other name which is not a constitutional name, and he should be known by that. He is known by that name as the governor of that state. So I think it's not. It's definitely against the provision of the constitution. And secondly, he is the head of a state. He is the head of the Tamil Nadu state. Therefore, he is bound by emblem used by that state. He can't use the emblem of central government. Whenever he will act in an official capacity, he should abide by the constitutional provision, which says that he is the governor of the state of Tamil Nadu.
Yeah. Yes. Let me then bring in, I think we're just fixing a link with Narayan Tirupati, but S. Muralidharan, political analyst, is also with us. Given what, an expert is saying, he's obviously former justice, he's served as a legal advisor to a governor formerly. Is this not needless confrontation by Governor R. Ravi? You may have a point of view. He expressed that point of view when he talked about Tamil Nadu versus Tamilagam. He may even have a point of view on what Dravidian politics is doing to the state and whether it's good or bad. But, to change the name of the state, that's crossing a line.
No, not Shivani, I will not agree with on that.
See, Tamilagam is a word which been used widely. It is not something new. Tamil Nadu or Tamilagam. Tamilagam is probably the short form or the colloquial form of Tamil Nadu. In fact, if you go back in the freebies issued by the DMK government, especially the televisions and the mixie, grinder, whatever, you will always see is as Tamilagam. It's Tamilagam and the government, it's a gift from the Tamilagam government.
Okay.
So this has been in, it's been in use. There's nothing wrong in it. I don't see anything wrong. But this friction is because of the sequence of events, what happened yesterday. See, when he started delivering the speech, first of all, he was delivering the speech in Tamil. I'm sure everyone should have felt, happy about it and proud that, the governor who has come all the way from Bihar is speaking Tamil now. So I think they should have respected that, but they did not do that. The fringe elements of DMK, the alliance, they tried to heckle him.
Yeah.
They literally interrupted him. That is actually a violation of the code of conduct in a governor's address. One. Second is, after that, he has clarified today that certain portions, certain words in that written statement were not acceptable to him because it gives sort of a secessionist or separatist kind of idea. So he said, I'm not going to use this, and he had clarified it. So the government said that, no, it's already gone for publishing. So when you speak, you can always change it and speak. But I think they expected this, so they had this resolution in hand. Because to pass a resolution, they needed only some 8 minutes. So it was looking like, everything was pre-planned by the DMK just to target the governor. And I think whatever reaction we see today is in line with that. So
yeah, I think the reaction that has come vis-a-vis the posters, I'm going to come to that in just a bit because that is certainly unsavory for a party in power. But let me go across to Syed Hafiz, who's the DMK spokesperson. First, when the governor starts making his speech, even before you realize that he has skipped out certain parts of the speech, there are DMK, representatives, members of assembly who are heckling him. Then even as the governor is inside the assembly, the CM gets up and, moves a resolution against him. So you also did whatever you could do to humiliate him. And then you object to him walking off. Now, I could understand that you want him to get out because you did not register your protest in the assembly. You did what you wanted to do in the assembly. Then you have no moral high ground to ask who should get out or not.
Coming to the question, madam, I will tell you it is not the members of the DMK who had raised slogans against the governor when he was speaking. It is the alliance party of the DMK. So
but
DMK
sir, you are the power. You must take responsibility for that. They are your alliance partners.
Yes, they were alliance partners, and it is not new. BJP has done that in Shimla when governor was speaking. When governor was Urmila Singh was delivering her address, BJP had done this. This is a democratic process where legislators from all parties have done this in the past. So you cannot claim only DMK has done that or BJP has done that. So it is two different things. The protest against the governor's speech initially was not for his speech, but for his address outside the assembly calling Tamil Nadu as Tamilagam. So don't mix both of this.
No, I'm not mixing. I'm very much categorically saying that he hadn't even omitted certain parts of the speech. Even before that, he was heckled. But is that the right thing to do? Now, you have heckled him. You have moved a resolution against him. You've done what you wanted to do to show your opposition. You've also been as curt and as abrasive. So then what are you cribbing about?
Who initiated this? Who failed the convention? Who did not follow the convention?
Which convention are you talking about? Which convention?
Convention about skipping the pages, skipping the pages.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Even before he skipped anything, you had already heckled him. You had already attacked him after his Tamilagam remark. You called him an agent of the BJP and the RSS. You said he should go and do what he's doing from the BJP headquarters. You say everything you want to say, yet you want to act like you are not being abrasive.
I will tell you that the protest initially before the speech was what about his comments outside the assembly.
But that's what I'm saying. So what convention did he break when you were heckling him? What convention?
I'm telling you, it has happened in the past. There are very many government speeches where the opposition.
No, you said the governor started this. What are you talking about? Where did this start?
Governor
this started when he talked about Tamilagam being a better name versus Tamil Nadu. You could say that
Yes.
several bills are pending with him. That's also your skirmish with him. Leave that
Exactly.
aside. But
That is also a part of
what
it.
he said
Yes.
outside the assembly, you shouldn't be reacting in such a manner that nobody can express their view.
Madam, that you should be asking to the spokesperson of the BCK of the Congress. I am here as
So
a
you
DMK
condemn the heckling?
representative.
You condemn the heckling of the governor?
It is not heckling, madam. It is a democratic process which has happened in the past. BJP has done that too.
Okay.
Now coming to the point. Madam. Political parties are here to do politics. Governor is not here to do politics. Okay, he cannot choose to omit and add his view. Everybody who
No,
knows
but I just had
Constitution
a
knows
legal
that
advisor.
speech-
One second. I just had an expert, a former judge on the show who said the governor has the power to omit certain portions. It's not as if
But
he
he
has
cannot
broken
add.
any constitutional
He-
law.
He cannot add. Madam, whatever he reads, it is not governor's wish. It is the policy of the government of
Yeah.
the day. Okay, he is just a nominee who cannot decide what this government has to do.
He is
So
not
everybody
deciding
knows
that, but he is uncomfortable with certain portions. He omitted that. And as one of our
Then
panelists
let
said,
him not-
he did
let him-
inform
let
the
him
government
not-
that I'm uncomfortable with these portions.
That is a fake news, madam. I will tell you. On 7th, he has signed and agreed to come and deliver the speech which has been drafted.
The same
If he
speech,
had
the one
issued,
that
why
you
did he
had on
sign?
record. Okay.
Yes, we had
I
on
think
record. That
Sumansi
is the
Raman
speech
also
he
wants
has
to come
signed.
in. Sumansi Raman, it is clear
Why
that
did he
both
sign?
sides, one second sir, one second, both sides clearly don't like each other. There's a history of the statements that have been made by the governor that irk the Dravidian party in power, DMK. There's also a history of bills not getting assent on time. But there is also a grey area there. There is no time limit in which the governor has to send back the bill. Governors can hold the bill as well. But leave that aside. My question is that both sides are being abrasive, right? You look at the posters today. That's also not really in keeping the prestige of the governor's office.
So the governor should act in a way that is that the prestige of his office is not sullied. Unfortunately, this governor does not seem to have acted in that manner. My sympathies are with the government. I think that they've been pushed to the wall. They've been frustrated. Their bills are not getting approved. They are not getting rejected either. And what do you want them to do? So I think that look what happened in the assembly yesterday. There are two very clear issues here. The speech is the speech of the government. It is not the governor's address. It is called the address by the governor, but it is actually a statement made by the state government. So whatever the democratically elected government gives to the governor, as long as it is not violative of the constitution, he should read it out. It is not his personal view. He is not articulating his opinion here. He could speak that out. I have no problem with him saying whatever he wants to in the various functions that he attends. But this is inside the assembly. This is a convention that has to be followed. And look, at the end of the day, walking out before the national anthem is played, I don't think it sort of fits in with the high office of the governor.
Yeah,
Whatever
but on
may
that
have been
issue,
the
Suman, can I come in on that issue? You can argue that the governor also couldn't really handle the situation very well. But did the chief minister handle it very well by moving a resolution against the governor right there and at that time? Didn't they compel him to just to go away?
The proper response to that would have been that the governor was in the chair, speaker was not in the chair. So whatever resolution the chief minister moved then had no legal sanctity. He only said, and if I remember right, he said that he proposes to move a resolution.
Yeah, proposes.
So
No, but why do that? You are doing that knowing that this
resolution
resolution is not going to happen, only to humiliate him.
No. If look, whatever it is, if he felt humiliated, he could have left after the national anthem and communicated that humiliation to the government.
So you
or
are saying
felt
he
to the
should sit
government or
there
to
and
the
take
public.
the humiliation, even if the government is humiliating him,
saying
but not leave
national
beforehand.
anthem is
But not, the
Yes,
government
national
should go ahead and
anthem is
humiliate the governor.
No, it's not about humiliation. He violated the protocol first. So the government violated, if the chief minister violated the protocol, he did so after the governor had
So
violated
that's
the
exactly
protocol.
my point. Both of them did what they did. Then nobody has a moral high ground. Now the government could have said that, listen, we tolerated it and we behaved in a manner that was not that was becoming of the state government. But they also did what they wanted to do.
Started this fight? Who started this problem in the assembly yesterday? Look, the opposition parties in many fora have the right to raise slogans and they have the right to walk out. Yes, I think the allies should not have raised slogans for 10 minutes. They should have raised slogans for a minute or 2 minutes and then walked out because they were proposing to walk out, planning to walk out anyway. But my point is the governor clearly, and look, what was objectionable in the text? I can understand if there was something which was violative of the constitution. The governor said, look, I can't read out this. Absolutely fine. But what was violated? They are speaking about
Can I bring in the
Dravidian model.
BJP representative on this? Because the AIA, DMK and the BJP in some senses have been supporting the governor and his moves. Is it not wrong on the part of the governor, Mr. Tirupati, what he did yesterday? He is being deliberately abrasive to the state government. While the governor's office needs to be respected, you have to understand that the actual representative of the public and its wishes and the powers rest with the Chief Minister and his Council of Ministers. There's no point fighting with that power as a governor.
He is not at all wrong yesterday. He has done his duty. He has done what he is expected to do. And he has the right to omit or avoid any lines from the speech that was given to him.
But he seems to be omitting stuff he doesn't like at a personal level, not really something that has any legal or constitutional argument against it.
There is no compulsion that he should read it. No law says that he should read it, right? We need to understand this. He has got he may have so many reasons to avoid that. He has got that right. After all, he is reading that. You should understand. So he will definitely avoid whatever is not true mentioned in that. And we don't know, it is not our job to investigate into this. But we need to understand whatever the wrong has been done only by the Chief Minister and the DMK people. The Tamil Nadu Legislative laws very clearly says that if at all, if any of the member obstructs or intervene during the course of the governor's address or before the course of the governor's address, or after the governor's address, if any member obstructs or intervenes, that member should be punished. He should be taken action. He should be punished for his action by the speaker. I am demanding that the speaker should punish the DMK members. My friend DMK spokesperson said there were no DMK members, but there were DMK members who were shouting, and the DMK allies, the assembly members. And lastly, after the speech of the address of the governor, it was the Chief Minister, Mr. MK Stalin, who tried to interrupt, who tried to disturb the governor. So he should be punished. Action should be taken against him. So the entire media is asking questions against the governor and asking questions against the BJP. No one dared to ask the DMK as to why Mr. MK Stalin, the Chief Minister, went unconstitutional yesterday. It was done by them only, and definitely
I think both sides could have handled it a little bit better, but let the DMK representative respond to what you're saying, that fundamentally it's you who didn't act as you should have.
Madam, it started with the governor's address. If he had read what was given by us, by the government of the day, then there was no need for my leader to pass a resolution. Politics is politics, madam. We have accused Ravi, Governor Ravi of doing this. It is very apparent today that a very
they have the right to insult the governor. He says he has got the right to humiliate the governor as a politician. No two horns are there for a politician. What is this? It is an assembly, and the discipline and the decency should have been maintained.
Government, that is an absolute violation of the law and the constitution. That is absolute violation of the law and the constitution, madam. This is really disturbing. There is no precedent. You have to have a constitutional amendment to call it Tamilagam. What more is obvious than what Ravi is doing? That is sheer politics.
You are mixing two issues. One second. What he does outside of the assembly is one issue. But what transpired inside the assembly is completely another issue. And I think we've had enough experts now elucidate the fact that while the convention is you'll read out the speech by the government, the governor is not mandated by the constitution or by the law to do so. We've got an expert saying that very clearly. I'll bring him again. But I want to ask you, Mr. Syed Hafiz, the question about how the government is responding to the governor's ideas and statements at large. Now, this is outside the assembly. I'm not discussing what happened inside the assembly. He talks about Tamilagam versus Tamil Nadu. You've got DMK people coming out and say, oh, you are a BJP RSS agent. Why don't you go to BJP headquarters? This transpires inside the assembly, or he sends an invite, as wrong as you may deem it to be. You run trends about hashtag get out. What kind of politics is this? You can't just go back Modi, get out Ravi, as if you are some separate domain. You have to fight with people and debate with people. You cannot just say, oh, we don't want you here. Aise nahi chalta hai. This doesn't work like that.
Madam, we don't have a problem with political parties doing politics. Understand that. BJP is there to do politics. Alunar Ravi is not here for politics.
But in the past, you have said go back Modi also for the Prime Minister. Why?
That is a part of politics. How many hashtags? Go back Rahul Gandhi, go back Stalin.
Who has said that? I don't remember trends being run on this. But every time you had the Home Minister or the PM go to Tamil Nadu, you will have these trends. Is this good politics?
It is part of politics, madam. It is part of politics to demonstrate, to protest. Okay, if we use anything unconstitutional, you always have a problem. Discuss with us, put case on us. We don't have a problem. The point again here is simple. The Governor Ravi here is to do politics, which is not good for the office which he is holding.
Okay.
Today, it is a blatant violation of the constitution by not calling himself a Tamil Nadu governor and not inviting people under Rajbhavan Tamil Nadu, but Tamil Nadu Alunar.
Okay. Can I bring in Sumansi Raman once again, and I'll go to Mr. Muralidharan also. Sumansi Raman, do you sense that the DMK government is a little bit uncomfortable, jittery, or unnerved in handling a governor who has a point of his own? It's almost a childish fight that you can't say this. If you say this, you are so-and-so's agent. The man is voicing, for example, his opinion about Tamilagam versus Tamil Nadu. They could have argued against the idea and debated instead of, slandering him or labeling him.
See, most, or I would say many, if not almost all the opposition group states are having problems with governors, whether it is West Bengal or, whether the Lieutenant Governor in Delhi
or Kerala.
And almost Kerala, everywhere there are issues where opposition parties are part. Now, this is very unfortunate because, look, the role of the governor is to help in the overall governance, not to impede it or function as a kind of a block for governance. I have no problem with what Mr. Ravi says in his speeches and his private functions. I think the DMK is probably overreacting to some of the stuff
that was my limited point.
But that is not the point. The point, Shivani, is that the governor is actually blocking governance. If he feels that, and how is he doing that? By using a loophole in the law. Similarly, the loophole that there is no law which mandates that he should read every line or every word of the state government speech. And there is a convention which has been followed for the vast majority of
okay. I have limited time, so let me give Mr. Muralidharan.
Last point, Shivani. I think you are incorrect when you say that the AIA-DMK and the BJP are backing the governor. The AIA-DMK is distancing itself. The BJP is the only party which is backing the governor in Tamil Nadu today. And I believe that they are making a mistake because very simply they are giving ground to the DMK to say that, look, we told you so, that the governor is functioning as an agent of the BJP, and see, the only party that is defending him in Tamil Nadu today is the BJP.
Okay. I'll come to the whole agent of the central government thing, because as I understand, the governor is indeed meant to be an agent of the central government. So what are we doing? What is the hullabaloo about, frankly? It's always been the case where before BJP was in power. It's going to be the case after BJP is not in power too. But Mr. S. Muralidharan, my question to you is this. It doesn't serve either side, and certainly doesn't serve the governor to be standoffish with the state government. The state government is not going anywhere. That's the elected government. What do you see as the future of these two parties?
Yes, it is. See, the governor is being a little arrogant. You can definitely say that because, yes, he's sitting on certain bills, etc. But is this the way to solve the issue, confronting him? I don't think so. If Mr. Karunanidhi would have been alive, I don't think Mr. Karunanidhi would do anything such as this, because you heckle him, you insult him, and you expect him to mellow down. I don't think so. That's how he is reacting today.
Okay.
And I was appalled to see Mr. Sumant Ravan in lighter vein saying that he should have walked out after the national. How many times we have seen Mr. Sumant Ravan walking out of TV programs when he,
okay, let's not get personal. Can I get 1 second? Let's not get personal. CB Pandey, I have only 30 seconds left. 1 second, sir. I have only 30 seconds left. CB Pandey, please. Mr. Pandey, as I understand, it is quite clear that the governor is indeed the agent of the central government. So in that regard, when state governments are up in arms that, oh, you're an agent of the central government today is the BJP, is that an argument against a governor?
The governor is no doubt he's the agent of the central government because he is appointed by the central government. But at the same time, governor is bound by oath, and his oath is he will protect, defend the constitution. Under his oath, he says that he is a protector, defender of the constitution. So therefore, unless he acts against the constitution, he cannot be castigated.
Yeah.
But so far, to some extent, if he is doing some politics or to some extent, he is protecting the interest of the central government. So I don't think to that extent he can do it, and they are doing it. It's not
exactly.
The first
So
case.
is it becoming a trend now in non-BJP ruled states that state governments are also blowing their fights out of proportion with governors purely to make a point against the central government? I have to leave it at that. Let's see how this goes. A big thanks to all of our guests for joining us. On the other side, don't go anywhere. An exclusive conversation with author Sanjeev Sanyal on his new book, Revolutionaries, the other story of how India won its freedom. A book that talks of the armed struggle that won us our independence too, along with the non-violent movement. Just who diminished the role of these fighters from history books? That and more coming up.
Delhi has recorded minimum temperature of 1.9 degrees Celsius as the national capital reels under severe cold wave. A thick layer of fog covered Delhi and its adjoining areas, lowering the visibility. Around 20 flights from the Indira Gandhi International Airport and 42 trains have been delayed due to the foggy weather.
Delhi has recorded its lowest temperature of the season with submergence at 1.9 degrees Celsius. Also, this is the lowest which the national capital has achieved for this winter season. If we talk about the visibility, it is as low as 50 meters in Delhi. Currently, we are reporting from the Kartavya Path area. These are the visuals we are showing you on CNN News 18 that how a dense layer of fog has completely covered the capital city.
With the prevailing cold wave across North India, a normal life has taken a hit across the northern part of India. In fact, due to the prevailing foggy conditions, a lot of trains are being delayed. And in fact, as per Northern Railways, trains bound to the national capital, around 42 such trains have been delayed. The Northern Railways have maintained that 42 trains which are delayed on the Sunday morning are being delayed for around 4 to 5 hours.
Odisha CM Naveen Patnaik, along with Union Ministers Jyotiraditya Scindia and Dharmendra Pradhan, inaugurated direct flight services from Bhubaneswar to Rourkela. This move has been taken ahead of Odisha Hockey World Cup that will commence on January 13th. Naveen Patnaik also expressed his appreciation to PM Narendra Modi for his constant support. A leopard was rescued after it entered a house in Aligarh's Kasba Jawan village in Uttar Pradesh. According to reports, the big cat entered the home after being chased into it by villagers. The officials carried the big cat after it was tranquilized. The resident Sunita said that the leopard tried to attack her, but that she immediately hid in the kitchen.
ऐसे मुझ पे बहरा के पड़ा तो मैं भागी थी धक्का लेके तो वो तुरंत ही कमरा में घुस गया था। कमरा बंद कर देता नहीं बंद नहीं कर पाए थे इतना मौका ही नहीं दिया उसने हम तो किचन में ही बंद हो गए पड़ोस वालों ने दी है हमने कहा था पड़ोस वालों के किच्ची मार रहे थे तो उन्होंने उनसे कहा उन्होंने ये कही तुम आप लिख लो मैंने कि हम नहीं निकल पाएंगे शेर है इसमें और आप जाओ उसने किचन पे बाहर नहीं किया गेट पे नहीं कोई नहीं बच पाते वो तो कमरे में ही उसने इन्वर्टर वगैरह तोड़े हैं लाइट वगैरह सारी खराब कर दी और ये मोटर वगैरह सब तोड़ दी उन्होंने।
A criminal shot and injured a journalist identified as Rajesh Anal in Bihar's Siwan district. The injured journalist was admitted to Sadar Hospital in Siwan after seeing his serious condition. Rajesh Anal was returning home after closing a shop when two bike riders attacked him and fled after firing. Further investigation into this matter is on.
ये मुख्यमंत्री जी आ रहे हैं, माहौल बिगाड़ने के लिए ऐसा किया गया है, दूसरा कोई बात नहीं। जिला का माहौल खराब किया जाए इसलिए देखे हैं तो वे बताएंगे, FIR करेंगे तो खुद बताएंगे, अलग कोई बात है, लेकिन माहौल खराब करने के लिए ऐसा किया गया। ये हम
प्रशासन से क्या आप लोग चाहते हैं?
प्रशासन तो हर वक्त जो भी क्राइम करता है उसको पकड़ कर जेल प्रशासन भेजती है, ये भी जो क्राइम किया है वो जेल जाएगा।
The Assam police intercepted a car and nabbed 2 drug peddlers and 1 other person near Assam's Jatinga area. The police have recovered 42 narcotic capsules that weigh 20 grams, which the accused kept in small plastic containers. The police have been keeping an eye on the nexus in order to catch them.
एक प्लास्टिक बोतल में मिला था, वहाँ पे छुपा के रखा था, तो टोटल 42 जो छोटा कंटेनर्स है वो मिला है, और वेट करने के बाद उसका अराउंड 20 ग्राम्स जैसा मिला है। जितना जो ऑपरेशंस चला रहे थे तो अलग अलग आदमी था, तो उनका जो सोर्स है या किसी का कुछ कांटेक्ट है, उस हिसाब से हम लोग जैसे नज़र रखे हुए थे, जैसे इन्फॉर्मेशन मिला कि ऐसा ऐसा ला सकते हैं, तो उस हिसाब से हम लोग ये ऑपरेशन किया, तो आज सक्सेसफुल हुआ।
2 workers died and 3 people were rescued after portions of concrete slabs of an under-construction building collapsed in Hyderabad's Kukatpalli. Out of the 3 people rescued, 1 worker sustained minor injuries. The injured worker was shifted to a nearby hospital. The municipal corporation also issued a show-cause notice to the building owner for deviating from the sanctioned permit plan.
ERF local teams and also other local people helped us to clear all the debris. The 5 people was on the top of the
History has always been the foreground of politics. In fact, history is where most of political battles are fought, and it is fundamental to which narrative wins or rules. And no wonder in recent times, for a young country but an old civilization like India, the main battleground has become history, whether it's our textbooks or outside of it. I'm in conversation with an economist and author today, Sanjeev Sanyal. And Sanjeev Sanyal, you've come out with your new book, Revolutionaries, the other story of how India won its freedom. The title itself obviously tells us that you want to correct in some manner the history that has been told to us about our freedom movement. So give us a little bit of a snapshot of your book. Why this book? Why the effort to, write down the other story? And why is it the other story and not the mainstream story?
So, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show. Let me say that the idea behind this book is to point out that India's freedom struggle wasn't the uniquely non-violent movement that you are led to believe from the official narratives in your textbooks, documentaries and other things. There was an armed resistance. That armed resistance, by the way, goes back to the 18th century. But this book limits itself to the first half of the 20th century. And the revolutionaries not only were putting up armed resistance, they were not a small group of people. This was a very large network. This network existed, of course, across India, but also existed in Germany, in Japan, in California, in Canada, in Singapore, and Persia, many other places. This network was a very serious effort, but when you read our textbooks, first of all, very rarely are the revolutionaries mentioned at all.
Yeah.
But when they are mentioned, you get the impression that, one fine morning Bhagat Singh got up and threw a bomb. And so they are random acts of individual courage, but deliberately presented to you as if they didn't have any consequence.
Yeah.
But the idea behind the book is to show you, first of all, that these groups were, first of all, large in number. They were powerful enough even within the Congress that, for example, Netaji was able to win an election against the Gandhians in an open election, so inside the INC. But also that they had a clear objectives, one of them being to cause an insurrection in the British Indian Army. They held up this effort, Many of the characters are the same, by the way, throughout this process. So, Raj Bihari Bose attempts in the First World War to carry out an insurrection in the British Indian Army, nearly succeeds but ultimately fails. But then he is the same person who comes in the Second World War and sets up the INA in Singapore. Contrary to popular belief, it's not Netaji who set up the INA, the Indian National Army in Singapore. It is Raj Bihari Bose who had already attempted to do it in the First World War. So these are repeated efforts by the same people.
And they believed in winning independence more by beating the British, you know, as some would say, by very violent means or by an armed struggle. For some reason in India, even when we were growing up, we were led to believe that it was mostly a peaceful movement or a non-violent movement, and that is the way to go, that somehow violent movements or armed struggles were looked down upon. Isn't that
That's absolutely the problem. You know, the impression you get is that we gently suggested to the British that they should leave and they politely left. Now, I understand that that's what the British historians would like us to believe. But the question is, why is it that we are ending up believing, but when the overwhelming evidence is that it was extremely violent.
But why is it so, according to you? Is it because the Mahatma Gandhi idea of peace and non-violence was what we wanted independent India to believe in more, and not really the more violent means?
Well, Mahatma Gandhi, of course, was only there till 1948. Much of this changing of history happened subsequent to that in the 1950s and 1960s. And what is important to remember, that it was done very deliberately, because one strand, not the entire Indian National Congress, but one strand of the Indian National Congress wanted to tell a particular story. So essentially what the Nehruvians did, they evicted from the story all others that had not from their own group. And it was done very deliberately. So you have, for example, historians like R.C. Majumdar, who had been originally given the job of writing India's official history of the freedom struggle, was evicted because he was not sufficiently pliant. You have, for example, many of the symbols of revolutionary struggle were actually erased. I don't know if people know this, but Cellular Jail was actually almost demolished because it was saved at the very last minute. Similarly, Maulana Azad Medical College in Delhi, it was the site of a prison where many revolutionaries were hanged. In the 1950s, the revolutionaries asked for a small memorial to be built near the gallows. That was not given. First, Nehru agreed to it, but in fact, what happened was that that place was just demolished.
So the memory was erased knowingly and with clear intent.
Absolutely. And the reason this happened, the revolutionaries were not able to put up a resistance to this is because almost all their top leadership had been eliminated by the British. So although it was a very large movement, all their key leaders, almost nobody survived till independence. Whether it's Bismil or Chandrasekhar Azad, Sachindranath Sanyal, Bhagat Singh, you name it, Raj Bihari Bose or any of these great leaders of the revolutionary, Netaji of course famously disappeared or died depending on your belief. None of their great leaders survived till independence. Therefore, even though they had been a very important part of the struggle, they were not given their due. And in fact, even worse, the soldiers of the INA, the sailors of the Navy, Royal Indian Navy, who had revolted in 1946, none of them were actually taken back into the army or the navy, and they were not even given recognition as freedom fighters till much, much later.
That seems vicious almost, isn't it?
Absolutely, it was absolutely vicious. It's a story that absolutely needs to be told.
So, what you have mentioned, what your central theme of the book is that a lot of these acts, the violent acts or the armed struggle, are presented as, here and there individual acts of courage or individual acts of, resistance towards the British, but they didn't have any cohesion, they didn't have any central idea, central ideology, or even a central strand. When somebody reads this book, what's the idea they're going to get? And I mean, if you can tease us a little bit about what is a common thread between these revolutionaries.
So many of the ideas of modern India actually emanate from this revolutionary movement. This has actually been hidden. So right from the 1910s, the idea behind this armed struggle was also a very modern idea. So, although they drew their inspiration from earlier eras of resistance, whether it's 1857 or Shivaji or Guru Gobind or whatever it may be, the early 20th century revolutionaries were very modern in that they had very modern ideas about how India should be after independence. So, for example, the constitution of the Hindustan Republican Association, written by Sanjeev Sanyal, is the very first place where they clearly mention that after independence, India should be a democratic republic based on universal suffrage.
That's a concept ahead of its time at that time.
Absolutely. That is what we are today. But do remember that when he was writing this, universal suffrage itself was not universally accepted. Very few countries in the world had universal suffrage.
Even the so-called modern countries did not have universal
Absolutely.
suffrage.
It's only in 1928 that all women in the UK got the vote. Many other countries who were supposedly democratic restricted their votes not even to the entire male population, but a small section of the male population. So, first of all, democracy was there only in a few countries, and even there it was to only a small segment of the population. Women in many cases not, even many men were not. So, idea of universal suffrage was a new one. The idea India should be a republic was a completely new one. Remember, the Congress at this point was only asking for dominion status. And even those who were asking for Purna Swaraj or full freedom had not yet enunciated clearly what is it that they wanted afterwards.
What India would be afterwards.
So, in fact, there were many debates even within the revolutionaries. I mean, it's quite interesting if you read the debates within the revolutionaries at that time. Even within the revolutionaries, there were those who advocated a constitutional monarchy with Sayaji Gaikwad as the constitutional monarch. So, there were other debates, but ultimately it is the revolutionaries, particularly the Hindustan Republican Association, the name itself is evocative, and they came up with the idea, no, we are going to be a democratic republic. And this, there are many things of today that come from this strand, our national greeting, Jai Hind. It derives from the revolutionary movement, from the INA.
The most important thing in establishing the fact that these weren't random individual acts which were, strewn around the place and through the years is to establish if there was indeed a network between these revolutionaries. So, in your book, how have you established that they were actually joined by a network or even under an institution? And how has that institution or its ideas lived till today? What are the remnants of those institutions?
So, first of all, it is very important to understand that it was indeed very well connected through, and that is one of the things that I've made.
Not just globally in all of these other countries,
even
but within India.
Absolutely. There was something called the Anushilan Samiti, which was like the overarching network, mostly in Bengal, but then it spread eventually across the country. There were others like Savarkar's Abhinav Bharat, etc., which got linked to this, so that then it became genuinely a big network inside India and outside. And by the way, it is important to remember that the Anushilan Samiti was actually a network of akhadas. Okay, there were always been historically in India, every village, temple, etc., would have an akhada. So networking these akhadas was what they were doing. Now, this network, of course, spread across the world using various other networks as well. For example, the Gurudwaras in North America were a very important part of this network. And so now what happens is, of course, this movement carries on, various things happen, but then because its leadership is essentially killed off in every generation faced it, but certainly by the 40s they had been completely killed off. Nobody survives into, almost very few people at least, survive into independent India. So the various strands of this revolutionary movement essentially reach independent India in a disaggregated, separated kind of way. But they're still around. So, and this is true across the ideological spectrum. The left, right and center have their strands.
From these revolutionary
Absolutely. So just to give you examples. One revolutionary called M.N. Roy ended up in Tashkent in 1920 and he founded the CPI. Another group led by Jogen Chatterjee and others, Trideep Chaudhary and others, and they ended up creating what is called the Revolutionary Socialist Party, the RSP. Now it's a small party, but once it was a reasonably large party. And then there is the RSS. The RSS was set up by the Nagpur head of the Anushoolan Samiti called Hedgewar. And Hedgewar RSS is totally based on this idea of a network of akhadas. If you read Sri Aurobindo's Bhavani Mandir, you have essentially, if you just read it end to end, it's 18 pages, so anybody in the audience just Google it up. And it tells you the clear format of how the RSS work. What is a shakha? It's basically an akhada. And therefore a network of akhadas is the Anushoolan Samiti.
So today, one of the biggest criticisms in today's politics against the RSS and everything that comes from it, even the BJP, is that you were not around when the Indians were fighting for its freedom. Do you believe that that narrative is wrong?
Well, it's ridiculous to claim that, you know, a party that was formally founded in 1980, that particular organization could not possibly have fought for
Obviously,
Indian...
the BJP was not around.
Yeah, the BJP was not around. But the intellectual strands on which many of these things are based certainly did exist before independence. As I said, by many twists and turns, the strands, intellectual strands going back to the revolutionaries has ended up today through the RSS into the BJP. So the nationalist language they use, whether they're being true to it or not is a matter of debate.
Yeah.
But certainly the language they use, the ideas they have, many of them go back to this early period of revolutionary movement. And by the way, there are many twists and turns and splits along the way in all of these leftover fragments. So, for example, the CPI. The CPI started out in Tashkent, led by M.N. Roy, but M.N. Roy himself drifted off from the movement. So the CPI ironically ended up being controlled partly on one branch of it by the Russians and some branch of it by the British communists in the 1930s. So during the Second World War, the CPI actually sided with the British. So, you know, so there are many twists and turns, and in fact, that's how the RSP came to be. The Marxists who were very suspicious of colonial takeover of the communist movement, then split off and created the RSP. So they were called the Anushoolan Marxists, and then later on the RSP. So there are many branches, splits, all kinds of things are happening along the way. How it has ended up today and how they fit in is a complicated thing, because obviously the ideological debates of today are very different from the ideological debates of 100 years ago.
But just generally speaking, don't you think in India the ideological divides of today are overbearing on the history and how we should view it? I mean, for some reason we are unable, I mean, there's a certain thought that you cannot accept so and so as a legitimate part of India's freedom struggle, even for example the recent debates on Savarkar, because you disagree with him, but there is a general sense of not being able to accept all kinds
Absolutely,
who contributed to it.
There is, Indian freedom movement was a very wide movement. The Congress itself was a very big tent in which the revolutionaries had a very important part as well. You hear sometimes about the extremists versus moderates, but the fact of the matter is that's the wrong way to tell. Tell the story. The Lal Bal Pal, why they were being called extremists? Well, they were asking for freedom. Hello, that's not a particularly extremist idea. The moderates, on the other hand, were making small-time petitions. So if you take it from the language of the revolutionaries, they thought of one group as the nationalists and the other group as the loyalists. So you see, you have to be very careful about what you extrapolate into today's politics.
So let me just let me ask it bluntly. Do you think today's Congress is a little bit nervous about the other story of how India won its freedom, as you call it, and the revolutionaries' role and others who they may ideologically differ from, but accepting them as legitimate parts of India's freedom struggle?
Well,
is it
I'm not a politician. It's up to them to judge, but it is absolutely wrong for any group to try and delegitimize other branches of the freedom struggle. And by the way, I have talked here largely about the revolutionaries, but do remember that the revolutionaries themselves are part of a wider landscape. which included peasant movements, for example, the Eka movement led by Madari Pasi, or the large number of tribal revolts that happened, and they were, all of these, these Eka movement or these various tribal revolts, all of them had a very close link to the revolutionaries. They had very, Alluri Sitaramaya Raju, now popularized by RRR, was himself a revolutionary. Similarly, there are parts of India that are not a part of the story today, but are actually, when seen from a revolutionary perspective, very important. For example, Manipur. Now, nobody hears of Manipur in our freedom discourse, right? But let me tell you about Manipur. Manipur was the place where there was the last resistance of the traditional nobility against British rule. In 1890, the Manipuri nobility rose in revolt. This is the last spark of traditional elite against British rule. It is also the first part of India that got liberated by Subhash Chandra Bose's INA. So the liberation of, so the role of Manipur is absolutely critical. In fact, it is one of the very few places where the revolutionaries actually achieved political power. So you see some of the early chief ministers, etc. of Manipur, they had their roots back in the INA attempt to liberate India. That's very, very unique. When many other places they were absolutely suppressed and kept out of the story. So Manipur, again, as I said, you wouldn't think of it as a particularly important part of Indian history. It isn't if you see it from the other perspective. But if you see it from the revolutionary perspective, absolutely central to the story.
Now the tragedy here, Sanjeev, is that a lot of it is being written in books by authors like yourself, but it is not really finding its space in Indian textbooks. I mean, the Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan only recently was on record to say that from this year onwards, in fact from this month onwards, India's real history will be taught. Now, I know that it's a larger question, what is real and what is not so real, but when are we going to actually have the change in Indian textbooks to reflect all of these strands of the revolutionaries and others and all kinds of people who came together to win India its freedom, or the more wholesome collective, picture of India's freedom movement? Isn't that what is required?
I think there is now general acceptance of the fact that we need to have new textbooks and tell our Indian story from an Indian lens. And this is not just about this little bit of history. There are all kinds of colonial era, Marxist and other layers of distortions that are there in our school textbooks. They now need to be replaced with a more fact-based story. Now, for doing this, we need to first establish the facts, tell a story, test it in the general population so that there is wider acceptance of it. The idea is not to replace one bunch of lies with another bunch of lies. The point is that it must be properly researched. So the scholarly work had to be done. It had to be road tested. This book is one part of an effort to get people to respond to the other narratives. And then it then seeps into, so one shouldn't do it the other way around, because otherwise what will happen, first of all, you'll end up with shoddy scholarship. And then, it's a debate between two sets of distortions, which is not what you want. Two, you need wider acceptance of whatever it is.
So that it cannot be reverted or changed back either.
Absolutely.
Once that change is made, it has to be acceptable enough that it continues to be in our textbooks, because we don't want it to be governed by who's in power at that time.
Absolutely. So once you've got people to know about Anshul and Samiti, you know the contributions of Netaji and Raj Bihari Bose and Bismil and Ashfaqullah Khan and all these people, you know why they were doing what they were doing, then you see extracting them is not that easy. I mean, let's face it, despite decades upon decades of a particular narrative of the Congress being thrust, these names did not disappear. All that was achieved, they managed to do, is to separate them into compartments and sort of diminish them. They were not able to cause them to disappear. After all, enough material remained that I was able to come and write this book. So,
no, but that effort has to be done now. If we let that be another 100 years, who knows?
So
even that might be wiped off.
The good news is that there is now a momentum. Yeah. There are other writers other than myself who are also doing this. There are academic historians. And then, it becomes a momentum. And by the way, We are here talking about history. This has to be done in other fields of social sciences as well. I mean, the way our economics textbooks are still taught, you would get the feeling that the Soviet Union is still around.
Finally, I think, would you say time has come that Indians also accept that we were quote-unquote violent and our armed struggle was equally important? I don't know why we carry a little bit of baggage, or there is a little bit of shame.
Why are we apologetic about it?
There's a little bit of shame associated with it.
We were a country under occupation for hundreds of years by foreigners who came here and exploited us and did horrible things to us. Some of this happened within living memory. I mean, the Great Bengal famine happened in just 1943. There are people around who remember it. And tens of millions of people died in famines and plagues and so on that happened under colonial rule, and even before that under Turkic and Mughal rule. Why should we be apologetic about the fact that we put up resistance? After all, the French are not apologetic about the resistance against the Nazis. The Irish are not apologetic about the resistance they put up against the same British rule. Or the Americans, what Washington and his soldiers did against the British imperialists in the United States. Why have we been taught to be apologetic about the fact that we did what is entirely human and natural, to put up an armed resistance against the occupation of our country?
All right, revolutionaries, the other story of how India won its freedom. Thank you so much for speaking to us, and many congratulations once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. From the time of the accident till the body was finally found on the road, nobody gets to know, despite the fact that an eyewitness is calling the police and is in touch with them.
Whatever Pakistan does is not talked about. What India does becomes the the whole aspect structure of the entire Western narrative.
Yes, there was pain. Nobody is doubting the hardship and pain that people had to go through. But virtually 2 months after demonetization, you had the Uttar Pradesh election, and the BJP won its biggest electoral victory in the biggest state in this country.
जैन समाज सड़क पर है, अपोज कर रही है, तो आप उनके साथ क्यों नहीं खड़े? उनका डिमांड बहुत ही सिंपल है. वो कहते हैं कि होली पिलग्रिमेज टाउन डिक्लेयर कर दिया जाए rather than a tourist spot.
Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I am Anand Narasimhan. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a nation that is in doldrums. 2,100 rupees for a kilogram of atta is what is the cost in areas like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Out of the 4 provinces, 2 of them hurtling towards balkanization. A nation in disarray in 75 years of its history. But it's obsessed with only one entity, Bharat, and coveting that something that doesn't belong to them. But however, they want to hurt Bharat. Their obsession of bleeding India with 1,000 cuts. Their obsession to hurt Hindus, Hindutva, and of course anything that is dear to Hindu Astha is something which is paramount. But more importantly, it's their desperation, because there is only one narrative that is still keeping them afloat. Dubte ko tinke ka sahara. It is that thinka or that straw that is the Kashmir narrative. And to try and stoke that divide, they're trying to expand PAN across North India, because Kashmir is gridlocked right now in terms of security since the abrogation of Article 370. That narrative also slipping away. So now we've got big inputs, and let's go straight across to that. Our investigations editor Manoj Gupta saying that they will do, the Pakistanis and Pakistan-backed entities will do anything and everything to derail the Bharat story, and that is centered around Ram Rajya as envisaged in our constitution, and they will attack Ram Mandir. They do not want Pak-based terror entities, these jihadi tanzeems which are being brought up and nurtured by the Pak establishment, will plan attacks to derail the construction of the Ram Mandir, the completion of the Ram Mandir by December 2023 for its inauguration in Jan 2024. So clearly, attacks are being planned, and the planning is major. It's being done for major optics. It will be done via using fidains or suicide bombers who will be brought in via Nepal. The ammunition for it will also be routed via that porous border that Nepal shares with Uttar Pradesh, and then will be brought towards the Devbhumi or Ram Bhumi of Ayodhya. So Ram Janmabhoomi, major target before opening in 2024. There have been multiple attacks at the Ram Mandir in the past, at Ram Janmabhoomi in the past. Even when Ram Lalla was in a tent, now Ram Lalla is Virajman there and a Bhavya Ram Mandir is being built. They don't want the construction to happen. There are entities, sadly, within India who would perhaps be smiling at the prospect of destruction of Ram Mandir. But this is all being fomented, the idea is being fomented by those who see their narrative slipping. So the motive of the groups is to trigger communal disharmony and social strife in our country, and again drive that wedge between Hindus and Muslims. Now the reasons: one, first, ISI is frustrated after a successful abrogation of Article 370. They see the Kashmir narrative slipping from their hands, not just locally but also globally. Infiltration attempts thwarted successfully. Of course, the entire drone drops, the narco-terror route have also been gridlocked. OGWs have been cracked down upon. 57 of their commanders, terror group commanders, have all been neutralized out of the 186 in 2022. Pak tunnels have been identified. Narco front has been busted. So this is the third reason. The fourth reason is the ISI relevance is based on provocations against India. So the military establishment finds itself thoroughly weakened and destabilized, because that entire narrative post-71 has been about bleeding India with 1,000 cuts, and that's not happened. They can't beat us in a straight war, and even in the proxy war, the attrition, the cost of this proxy war is increasingly becoming more and more expensive and dearer to the Pakistani establishment. Attack on Ram Mandir would sow seeds of communal discord and would be seen as an attack on Hindus and the BJP government. So this is what is happening. But even as we speak about this, and we were going to talk at length about this, targeting the beacon of Hindutva to attack Hindutva directly, there comes a message from the RSS Sarsang Chalak Mohan Bhagwat, who sent out a very stern message. A very stern message to Muslims in India, saying there is no need, Muslims have nothing to fear. So this is the fresh assertion. It's a written interview response to Panchajanya, an organizer, in Hindi and in English. The message is very clear. There is nothing for you to fear in this country. There is nothing for you to fear. But don't push this supremacy narrative. Don't try and push this supremacy narrative. Shed this supremacy narrative is what? What is this supremacy narrative is something that we will dwell upon with our panel of experts, even as we look at this entire attack or targeting the beacon of Hindutva to attack Hindutva. Here is a message, and I quote, "The simple truth is that Hindustan should remain Hindustan. There is no harm to Muslims living today in Bharat. If they wish to stick to their faith, they can. If they want to return to the faith of their ancestors, then they may. It is entirely their choice. There is no such stubbornness among Hindus. Islam has nothing to fear. But at the same time, Muslims must abandon their boisterous rhetoric of supremacy. हम 30% ही हिंदुस्तान पर राज करेंगे, तुम 70% क्या देश चलाओगे? This is a conversation, and this is something which is being said for more than 100 years. And I'll quote you on that, and I'll show you where it is being done. But let's go across to Siddhant Mishra, who's joining us with more on the phone. Siddhant, a very, very detailed interview talking about COVID, India's handling, the rise of Bharat, the role of the RSS, the evolution of the RSS, but more importantly, this RSS Hindutva narrative out to get Muslims. Mohan Bhagwat saying there is nothing for anybody to fear in Hindustan. But Hindustan must remain Hindustan. Don't change the DNA of Bharat.
Well, that's right, Anand. It's very rare that Bhagwat give interviews or interacts with media. This is one occasion where he has given this written interview to the organizer. And in fact, there are multiple takeaways in this interview, but the most significant one is being highlighted by you, Anand, where he says that Muslim has nothing to fear at all. Now, this is coming from Sir Sanchalak Mohan Bhagwat. Now, he says that just leave your idea of narrative supremacy. This is what Mohan Bhagwat has to say for the whole of Muslim community living in India. He also adds on to say that even if you want to stick to your faith, you can, and if you want to return to your ancestral faith, then you may. There is no boundary at all. But all we want you to do is